Now, as promised, let's get the latest on the public sector pay awards because the government's announced the numbers today on the basis of the recommendations from the independent review bodies who cover things like teachers, doctors, other healthcare workers, civil servants, prison officers, you name it. Here in the studio with me to help us out is our education editor, Bramwyn Jeffries. Hi, Bramwyn.
Hello.
And we're looking at the big screen from Westminster because Hugh Pym, health editor, is about to step in at any minute.
And
he's
here
putting his
he
coat
is.
down. This is like commentating on the Grand National or something, isn't it? And he is putting the headphones on.
Hello.
And he's fading the microphone up. He's
You're looking
wondering
at me
whether
on a
we're
camera,
there.
aren't you, Adam?
Hello, Hugh.
Hi, are you looking at me on a camera? There's a camera
We are,
ominously
yeah.
close to me, my word.
I think you're too big for that studio.
Well, it's not like it used to be. Cameras in a radio
It's fancier
studio.
now. Anyway, Hugh, you're actually on Newscast right now because we just got started without you.
Ah, well, sorry about that. I've literally come down from DH.
Okay, the Department of Health. Right, we will find out what Wes Streeting was saying in a second. But Bramwyn, what pay increase are teachers getting?
So teachers in England, I like the little way you slip that in at the end. Teachers in England are being offered a 4% pay award. And crucially, the government has found £615 million somewhere down the back of the sofa to pay for most of it. So 3% of that will be funded, leaving schools to find 1% efficiency. And this is massively different from their initial starting point. The government started by saying 2.8% and you can't have any extra money for it, at which point they were facing the prospect of teacher strikes.
How can an average school save 1% on its budget to then put that on staff costs?
So some of them are not filling behind staff who are leaving. They are being offered some extra advice and support from the government on things like how to get better utility deals, buy supplies at a cheaper rate, all of those kind of things. I have spoken to people running hundreds of schools across England in the last week, asking them, how does it look for next year? And the kind of expression that was being used was, it's grim out here. We're down to bare bones. We're going to dip into our reserves in order to find the 1% savings. They were really worried it was going to be more than 1%. So it's one of those things that the initial offer was looking quite stressful for them.
Yeah.
And they thought they would be facing strikes. So now, today, relief. Yes, they've got to find savings, but no more than they were expecting.
But I suppose we'll have to keep an eye out because that extra £615 million that's been found in the Department for Education budget to pass on to schools to pay for the teachers, that's obviously coming from somewhere.
It is, and there is absolutely nothing in what the government said so far today on where that money is coming from. Now, one of the things that sometimes happens when governments find a little bit of extra cash to smooth things over with the public sector is it comes out of capital spending. In the case of education, that raises questions for me about whether or not we will see, for example, a slowing down in spending on school buildings, which in many places are in a really poor state.
Right, Hugh's all settled now. Glad you had a few moments to collect your thoughts. So what's the picture in the NHS then? Because I know we talk about, the pay rise to the NHS is this, but actually there's lots of different types of jobs within the health service and it's much more complicated and nuanced than that.
Well, that's right, Adam. And of course, we've seen industrial action in the NHS in England going back to 2022 with the first nurses' strikes and then junior doctors' strikes. And then Labour made great play, Wes Streeting and colleagues after the election, that they had settled the industrial unrest in the NHS in England and the junior doctors had been sorted. But here we are with a pay award for this year, and I'll just run through the numbers quickly. So resident doctors, formerly known as junior doctors, on average are getting 5.4% this year. Consultants, the more senior doctors and other doctors and dentists will get 4%. And the NHS workers covered by the deal called Agenda for Change, that's nurses, ambulance staff, other hospital workers, they're getting 3.6%. And there was some unhappiness last year amongst the nursing union, certainly, and some of the other health unions, that they were getting less than the junior doctors as they were then. And it's the same this year. They're getting less than the resident doctors. Now, the government argument is that these awards are all above inflation. They're taking the prediction for this year, 3.2% for inflation, as their guide, rather than the recent 3.5%. Everyone's getting above inflation. The junior doctors are getting quite a lot more. But already we've had the BMA, British Medical Association, saying it's not enough. They're balloting anyway next week on a possible industrial action. Now they've got the numbers that will inform that ballot, and they've appealed to Wes Streeting to come back in for talks. Meanwhile, the GMB union and health union, they say they will ballot members. And I think the RCN, having talked to them, they are not happy at what they've been told is their pay award.
And the BMA, when they're talking about resident doctors, is it that age-old dispute about the fact that what they call pay restoration, that their pay has lagged behind in real terms for multiple years, which is why they need they would argue, a double-digit pay increase?
Exactly. So going back
again?
Pay restoration, that was the mantra during those times of strikes. They wanted it restored in real terms going right back to 2008. And they used the RPI measure of inflation, which always tends to be higher than the CPI measure, which is more widely used. So they're saying that, do you remember that 35% figure? They said they needed that. That was back in 2022. They're now saying because of successive pay rises, but also inflation, it sort of has come down to about 20%. So they would argue quite a lot more needs to happen to get them back to where they were in real terms. But at the same time, ministers are saying, well, if you look at the junior doctors, resident doctors now over 3 years, it's 28%. Come on, what's not to like about that? Anyway, I think we're going to have quite a few weeks of speculation about what might happen next with the health unions, including the BMA.
And what happened before you walked into the newscast studio at Westminster was you were chatting to Wes Streeting, the health secretary. What did he say?
He was talking on behalf of the government about pay awards in general. And certainly with resident doctors, he feels he's gone quite a long way to work towards restoration, and that the 5.4%, he's making no secret of the fact, yes, it is higher than the other health unions, but he wants to help the resident doctors and he understands their position. With the other health unions, his point is it is above inflation, 3.6%, and he wants to do everything he can to help their working conditions. But I think when it comes to the hard calculations being made by the unions, it'll be the numbers tell their own story, and there is that real frustration. He did say there is no more money. He's not prepared to go back and ask for more. And in terms of how these health pay awards are going to be funded, you'll remember the 2.8% was baked into hospital trust budgets and other employers' budgets. And so if they're paying out 5.4 or 3.6, where's the money coming from? The Department of Health saying it's coming from efficiency savings, the abolition of NHS England, money being saved at the centre, administrative roles, money being reallocated to the front line. Well, actually, a chunk of it is going into these pay packets, though they argue, well, they are front line because they work on the front line.
And Branwen, has it always been like this, where the government has a budget and then the independent pay review bodies come in and bust that budget, and then they have to scrabble around, and either people are happy because money is found or people are unhappy because money is not found, but ultimately plans have to change to take into account these new pay settlements? Has it always been like this?
It's not always the case that governments accept in full the recommendations of the individual pay review bodies. One of the things that they do is look at the labour market. Really, how much do we need to offer to have enough people working in public services? In the case of teachers, if you look at secondary schools, in most secondary subjects, there aren't enough people starting training as teachers and too many people going. It's a real problem. And one of their key pledges for this Labour government is 6,000 more teachers during this Parliament. Well, we've got thousands leaving every year, so that is a real challenge. Pay's one part of that. Today they've been talking about other things like flexibility. Being a teacher is not a very flexible job, and it's a largely female profession. So they're trying to think about how to address that and get more flexibility in terms of working hours. And of course, there are big issues around things like maternity pay for teachers as well.
And Hugh, I mean, this is just one step today for the NHS in England. There's some very big steps coming with this big 10-year plan that's in the pipeline.
Well, exactly. It's going to be a very busy month or so coming up. The 10-year plan for the NHS in England. I've been asking sources at the Department of Health when I was over there a short while ago, and it looks like early July now. And of course, the NHS's birthday is early July, so presentationally that might work quite well. A lot of work still going on that. They've had endless submissions, including from the public. That website where you could send in your views about what to do about the NHS. Some of them were not entirely printable or repeatable, but seriously, a lot of submissions coming in. They've got to try and come up with something which has headlines, which looks like something new, as well as the big themes. There's also, do you want me to run through some of the other things coming up?
Yeah, please do.
So there's a big report on physician associates. You'll remember the row there. The Doctors' Union has been pretty unhappy about the role of physician associates, that they are not doctors. Well, that's obvious, but there's been confusion over their roles, sometimes patients thinking they were doctors. And there's a review going on under Professor Gillian Leng, and it's become quite a toxic row there about physician associates, so we'll have to see how that is dealt with. That's pretty imminent. And then there's a cancer plan in September, which is really important. And that was mentioned at Buckingham Palace recently when the King made a speech to cancer charities and others there. I think so. There's a lot of interest in that coming up.
Lots to think about. Hugh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Bramwell, thanks to you too.
My pleasure.